This is our third presentation or PowerPoint on market failure, and we're looking at the tragedy of the commons, or common access resources, and public goods. The tragedy of the commons. This will be illustrated in class, or has been illustrated in in-class demonstration using the fishing example. In your own words, what do you think the tragedy of the commons is? And how is this a threat to sustainability? How is it a market failure? So if we haven't yet done the activity in class, you'll be able to answer this after that activity. So here's one example of common access resources. If many sheep are allowed to graze and nobody has private ownership over the land, so it's known as common resources or common access, then people won't be careful to take care of the land and will exploit it with bringing as many sheep as they can. This can lead to overgrazing and problems where it's no longer sustainable. The same thing can happen with fish, and as you have seen or will see in the fishing activity that we do in class. And certainly our atmosphere, again, if we don't, if it's treated as a common access, then people will be less inclined to take care of it. We're going to look now, focus on public goods. Pure public goods are what we call non-rivalrous and non-excludable. Non-rivalrous means when consumed by one person, it can be consumed in equal amounts by the remainder of society. So if we look at an example, a really clear one for me is street lighting. If you're enjoying the use of street lighting, your use of, or your enjoyment of it, is not going to take away from my use of the street light and enjoying its benefits. So it's non-rivalrous, it's also non-excludable. So the possibility of excluding others from consumption is impossible. So in other words, it means provision at all means provision for all, pardon me. This also means that you can't charge for it, because then you would be excluding those who can't afford it. The market left to itself will likely underproduce such goods, or possibly not produce them at all. This is because the market will only provide goods for which a profit can be made. It is difficult to make a profit producing pure public good because of the following characteristics: the non-rivalry or non-diminishability and the non-excludability. So it's not really possible to set up to charge for this. And as you can see in the example to the in the picture, you really cannot charge for viewing the sunset. Nobody would be paying you. Navigation systems like lighthouses or buoys are often classified as a public good. And so this one is non-excludable and non-rivalrous because, one, non-excludable, you can't prevent people from using the service of the buoy that's in the water. And it's non-rivalrous because if you're steering your boat away from it, that's not going to take away from someone else also using the buoy as a landmark. A lighthouse is termed a public good, again considered to have characteristics of being non-rival and non-excludable. Again, if the lighthouse is flashing the lights to warn of rocks and the shore and so on, one person taking advantage of seeing this will not prevent another person from taking advantage of it, so it's non-rivalrous. And it's non-excludable because you can't prevent people from using the services of the lighthouse. Street lighting I talked about before. Your use is not going to take away from my use, so it's non-rivalrous. And it's non-excludable because you can't prevent people from taking advantage and using the lighthouse. So public goods are a type of market failure because the private sector would be unwilling to supply them. Their non-excludability makes them non-marketable because non-payers cannot be prevented from enjoying the benefits of consumption. This is the free rider problem, when it is impossible to provide a good or service to some without it automatically and freely being available to others who do not contribute to its cost. Have you ever used Wikipedia? Have you ever contributed money to Wikipedia? If the answer is no, then you are a free rider. Free riders are those who enjoy the benefits of a public good without having to pay, because it's impossible to exclude them. Merit goods versus public goods. Goods which are deemed to be socially desirable, these are the merit goods, and which are likely to be underproduced and underconsumed through the market mechanism. But one big difference between merit goods and public goods is that merit goods can be provided by the market, whereas public goods cannot, but merit goods will be likely to be underprovided by the market. Oh, and here it is, the key difference, underproduced by the private sector, whereas public goods would not be produced by the private sector because they're non-rivalrous and non-excludable. Museums tend to be funded by government in most countries, as they are often not sufficiently profitable to be provided by the private sector. And so why do governments provide them if they're not profitable? Well, we could argue that they offer a lot of cultural benefits and have positive externalities. In contrast to pure public goods, merit goods could be, and indeed are, provided through the market, but not necessarily in sufficient quantities to maximize social welfare. So you can think of your own example of being here at the York School. This is an example of a merit good. It's a school, education. It can be provided by the private sector, which in this case it is, albeit it's non-profit, but it's not being provided by the government. And so, but it would be underprovided if that's all we had. If we only had private schools throughout all of Canada, there'd be many people that can't afford to attend, and so it would be underprovided and underconsumed. So thus, goods as education and healthcare are provided by the state, but there is also a parallel, thriving private sector provision. Prisons are generally provided by the public sector, though in the US and some other countries, prison services are increasingly being provided by private sector firms. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of this form of provision? Well, if it's done privately, they might be more efficient. One of the disadvantages might be is perhaps they're not going to be as humane as if a government were to provide it, and I'm sure you can think of many other reasons as well, or advantages and disadvantages. So merit goods will tend to be underprovided by the market because, one, they generate positive externalities, and we know that Q market is less than Q optimum with positive externalities. There's an unequal distribution of income, so some people may not be able to take advantage of these merit goods. Consumers may lack perfect information, meaning they might not know that this merit good is particularly valuable to consume, and consumers may be uncertain as to their future needs. So let me go back to consumers may lack perfect information. In the case of healthcare, an individual may not realize, for instance, the benefits of vaccines to society and may not then get vaccinated. So they may be lacking perfect information if that's how you feel about vaccines. I do realize that can be, that people can have other opinions and views of vaccines. Merit goods generate substantial positive externalities. This divergence means that the private market cannot be relied upon to ensure an efficient allocation of society's scarce resources. So fire service is usually classified as a merit good because of the positive externalities that result from it being provided. How should a fire service be provided and funded? Well, today in Toronto, it's funded entirely by the government and run by the government, I do believe. But once upon a time, I guess it was maybe in the 1800s, you actually had to pay for fire service. And on the outside of your building would be a plaque that you are a contributor, or if there was no plaque, then it would be known that you weren't contributing towards fire services. So if your building was burning down and you didn't have the plaque, the fire services would just go by. Now, of course, the unfortunate part is the effect it has on your neighbors, because the fire could spread and affect many other households as well. Health is a merit good, and again will usually be underprovided by the free market system. This is because of the positive externalities offered by society's good health. The police service, again, is often classified as a merit good, and I think this is self-explanatory of the positive externalities, certainly a safer society. The point is if people had to pay privately through the market for merit goods as health and education, they would consider only their private benefits and their private costs, and would thus consume too little from the point of view of the interests of society as a whole. So again, market left to its own devices would produce at Q market and consume at Q market, but society ideally wants it to be produced and consumed at Q optimum. So street cleaning is generally provided by the government or local government, and it might be classified as a merit good. Why will it not be provided in ideal quantities in a free market? Well, I could sort of envision if you were going down Yonge Street towards St. Clair, and street cleaning was only covered by the local merchants. Well, it might be quite clean right outside of each business, but probably in the middle of the road and on the farther edges of the sidewalk and maybe in alleyways. There could be an awful lot of refuse which could then attract rats and all sorts of problems. So I don't think we want it to be entirely left to the market system. So an unequal distribution of income. So as mentioned before, not everyone would be able to afford the merit goods. So many people would be unable to afford adequate education, healthcare, and housing in the absence of state provision or subsidy. Consumers may lack perfect information. So at one level, market provision of healthcare and education may not provide a socially optimum outcome because consumers may not be aware of all of the benefits of such goods. So if you think of something like healthcare just as an example, when you're young people tend to think that they're fairly invincible and often that they're not going to get sick, so they may not invest the money into the healthcare system. It's only as people get older, perhaps they realize the benefits of having a sound healthcare system. Consumers may be uncertain to their future needs. So a situation in which consumers are uncertain about future market information can lead to allocative inefficiency, with too little healthcare being consumed if state provision is not available. So again, let's go back to the example I just gave. When you're young, it's really difficult to anticipate what your future needs are going to be because you're much healthier at that point in your life, or at least generally people are. So governmental policies addressing the underprovision of merit goods. We could have direct government provision, we could have regulation, subsidies, a combination of government provision and market forces. Demerit goods. Can you remember the definition? Demerit goods are goods which are deemed to be socially undesirable and which are likely to be overproduced and overconsumed through the market mechanism. Examples of demerit goods are cigarettes, alcohol, and all other addictive drugs such as heroin and cocaine. Governmental policies to correct market failure arising from demerit goods. We could have persuasion, so this is the most likely to be achieved through negative advertising campaigns. We could have the imposition of a tax on the demerit good, and we could have regulations. We also have other examples in the previous PowerPoint where we were looking at possible solutions to externalities. You could go back and revisit those. Thank you.